Is the C-suite lagging in sustainability efforts? To discuss it, I'm joined by David South. He's Senior Principal for Energy and Utilities with West Monroe. Hello, David.
Hello, Robert. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for being with me today. Tell me a little bit about this quarterly report in terms of who you contacted, how many people, what industries and stuff like that. What was the basis of the survey?
Well, the surveys we do it on a regular basis, and we do it to help inform ourselves and our industry partners about activities in the marketplace. It's a pulse of about 150 C-level executives. As I said, we do it every quarter, and we cover various industries that we serve, and throughout the country. So it's every region, and it's mostly people in the C-suite. We get a lot of response from chief executive officers and chief financial and information officers, but there's others in that C-suite that also respond.
Okay, so what was the key takeaway on the Q4 report? What did you learn?
The major takeaway was that that executives are extremely positive about the plans that they have put in place to try to address COVID, and that those plans, largely hybrid work and trying to address a lot of the supply chain issues, are starting to work. They took a while to kind of get some grounding, but they're finding that they are working. There was also a lot of talk by the executives about how to hire and bring people back to work.
Yeah, I bet.
Right, and then the last thing is about travel and how to travel safely when you do travel, and to try to re-engage in all of the meetings and conferences and such that had taken place in the past to facilitate business, which took a hiatus with COVID. But we found a new way of doing it, largely through a hybrid work environment and Zoom, like we are on right now, to try to do business. And in some respect, it's been effective, but the challenge is that in order to do new business with new clients, you have to establish that personal relationship. That's a hard thing to do.
Sure.
Over Zoom.
Yeah, definitely. But I want to talk specifically about your findings with respect to sustainability efforts that the C-suite members are engaged in or not engaged in. I believe that one of the findings of this latest report is that 25% of those C-suite executives have no quarterly plans to create sustainability practices. Did that come as a surprise to you? And what's going on there?
Personally, because I'm in the business of sustainability at West Monroe, it didn't come as a complete surprise. I would say that there are particular industries that have been much more proactive. Those are largely multinationals or industries that have a large exposure to non-governmental organizations to influence their policies and their practices. Those industries have been more proactive. Industries in general have not been very attentive to sustainability matters, because they haven't had any pressure put on them and no requirements imposed on them to date.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering, is it possible that a lot of companies took their eye off the ball of sustainability because they were in survival mode in the last year, worried about cost, worried about COVID, worried about workers, just like you described at the top of this conversation? Is that a possibility?
Well, it's definitely a possibility, but the way we phrased our question here was whether or not they have taken action on sustainability, not whether or not they paused it in order to address higher priority items. So what you're getting here is really a response that this had not been a top priority issue for them, for their business. As we found, 4 in 10 said in the supply chain said that there's no action taken there, and so. And the reason for that, again, as I alluded to, is that there's not a regulatory requirement, and to date there hasn't been a financial requirement imposed on them. But I think changes are in the wind to change all of that.
They're probably worried about the cost of that too, at a time when they're extremely cost conscious, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I suppose I could take a glass half full approach and say that I could flip that and say that 75% of those executives do have quarterly plans. I mean, would that be a proper interpretation of that statistic?
Well, they have plans, or they have taken some action
Mm-hmm.
in some to some extent to understand what the implications of sustainability are on their business.
I
Yes,
see.
that's
Okay.
correct.
So geographically, is there a trend there? I understand that it's possible that those companies on the East and West Coast are a little bit more advanced on the sustainability bandwagon. Is that true or not?
It is true, and it's largely because sustainability is a broad term, and when one is looking at the environmental dimension of sustainability, because remember, sustainability consists of three pillars: environment, social, and governance
Mm-hmm.
matters. Um, the environmental side of that has been largely been driven by the reduction in fossil fuel power plants and their replacement with renewable energy.
Mm-hmm.
So the East and West Coasts have been very active in the adoption of rooftop solar, batteries, community solar programs, electric vehicles, all of those things that really are lessening the reliance on fossil fuels and thereby contribute to a more sustainable environment.
I see. Well, now, no supply chain exists in a vacuum. It involves a number of outside partners in order to make it work. I'm wondering to what extent companies are setting sustainability efforts for their in cooperation or collaboration with third-party partners. Did you get any indication there?
We did find that about 30% of the people that responded said they are setting standards with their partners and involving them.
Mm.
Walmart has been a leader in this area, setting up standards a number of years ago to actually engage all of its vendors. Because Walmart is like Amazon, except Walmart is a brick and mortar company, or had been. They have to rely on their supply chain to deliver all of the products that they put on their shelves.
Mm-hmm.
So they needed to figure out how can they reduce the carbon content of the products as well as the delivery mechanisms to get those goods to their brick and mortar stores.
Right.
So they've been very proactive in that area. Other companies have adopted that practice because in order for them to reduce their total footprint, they need to consider the supply chain. So that's why you're seeing that a lot more companies are focusing on the supply chain to improve the overall performance of their total footprint. I'm not sure if you're aware, but when most companies use something called the Global Reporting Initiative, which consists of Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions. Scope 1 is everything in your fence line. Scope 2 is everything you buy in terms of materials and such, and Scope 3 is kind of everything else.
The stuff that's not in your direct control by
not
any
in your
means.
direct control, right?
Yeah.
Well, one of those things that's not really in your direct control is your supply chain,
Sure.
unless you try to impose a requirement on those parties to do so. I'll just tell you, as a professional services firm, West Monroe has been asked by a number of our current clients, whether they be utilities or other clients, to actually tell them what are we doing to help reduce our footprint, which largely is travel to their site to provide professional services. And they want to know what are we doing with our building stock that we have 10 offices around the country. They want to know how are we contributing to a reduction in emissions for all of the travel we're doing. Now, we had a huge drop, 75%, if not more, in travel and the associated emissions with travel as a result of COVID.
Yeah.
And we don't see a complete rebound from that. We see more and more of what we're doing right now is working remotely, and only traveling on those occasions where it's absolutely necessary to minimize that carbon footprint.
I'm sure everybody's pretty much doing the same thing in the business world. The way I would think, the way to look at this maybe is that you said earlier in our conversation, there just hasn't been that much pressure on these companies to take action. I'm wondering, it probably comes from one of two places. It's either going to come from your customers affecting your brand image, or it's going to come from regulation in the government. What is your feeling about 2022 in terms of those two sources of pressure and incentive for companies to really start acting more in the direction of sustainability?
I think you're going to continue to get some pressure from customers who want greener products, and they want you to be responsive citizens within their communities. I don't foresee that we're going to get government action in terms of regulations or carbon taxes, but we are starting to see where state governments, for example, are making mandates to decarbonize their state in all of the industries in it. So that's one thing. That's setting a goal to be achieved. To me, the forcing mechanism in 2022 is going to be the order that's expected from the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is going to make it mandatory that for all public companies that file a 10K report, they have to disclose in a mandatory way what their greenhouse gas footprint is and its impact on climate change. That means that in essence, every company has to be responsible. And by making this public, that means anyone that's in the private equity space, financial space, a bank that is lending money or investing in these companies is now going to be aware of what the potential risk or cost of compliance with carbon emissions reduction might be going forward.
And will it be scope 1, 2, and 3?
Yes, it will be.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a big, tall order for these companies. So maybe we'll start seeing some additional progress in this direction. But in the meantime, David South of West Monroe, thank you very much for bringing us up to date on just what's going on out there in the C-suite right now, based on that West Monroe report. We'll be interested in hearing down the line subsequent reports and findings that you guys come up with. Love to talk to you again about that. But in the meantime, thank you very much for your time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.